Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me? A very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar on RC inference questions based on the author's opinion. And this comes to you from the house of GMATWhiz. Let me see who all are there. So I'll just call out the names that I can see. Hello, Kumar, Shobhit, Nazi, Anvay, Neera, Shalini, Akash, Shubham, Shivani, Tarun, Deep, Nikita, Shayantani, Ishwar. These are some of the names that I can see, guys. So if I cannot see any of your names and I haven't called out to you, don't worry. All of you are most welcome. And let me just quickly put up a poll to ask you guys whether I am clearly audible to all of you. Can you guys hear me as I speak? Let me know if you guys can hear me clearly. Wonderful. Great. So that's that. All of you can hear me. Wonderful. So let's get started. Let's set the ball rolling with this webinar. And before we move on, let me just quickly, very briefly tell you about myself. So my name is Sunita. I'll be your host for this entire session. And I have tons of experience in terms of teaching, content development, problem solving, mentoring students, helping them achieve their goals, their dreams. So enough about me. And here's what we're going to do today. Primarily, we are going to focus on how to read in the most effective manner and at the same time making note of the author's opinion. We get a lot of these questions which are based on, okay, what is the author likely to agree with? Which of the following would the author disagree with? And if you've got multiple opinions in the paragraph, in the passage, then there are even questions which ask you about the similarities between those opinions and differences between those opinions, right? So we're going to talk about how to answer some of these questions which are related to the author's opinion. And of course, we are going to solve hard questions while doing all of this. So that out of the way, let me see. So Akash says he will be giving his exam on Tuesday. Any last minute tips? Akash, whenever it comes to, last minute tips, I always tell my students, because I do a lot of private tutoring as well. I always tell my students to, if it is the last few days, as in the last 2 days, then I would say that go over your error log. Go over your entire error log, and I hope you have prepared one, to see what kind of mistakes you have been making and what steps you should keep in mind to overcome them. They help a lot. But then Tuesday is still some time away. So what you can do is probably give one more mock before you take the exam on Tuesday. Today is just Saturday. So maybe you can give a mock tomorrow and then spend the rest of Monday analyzing the mock and going over your error logs. So let me see if I have any other questions here. No, I don't. Right. Let's get started, guys. I'm sure you are also eager to see what's going to come up. So here's a passage for all of you guys. Even if you've done this passage at some point of time during your preparation, I still want you to kind of attend this, because today we're going to look at how to read this best. All right. Shubham says, I am not scoring very high with accuracy 80%. So Shubham, if you are saying the accuracy is 80% for which level of difficulty? If it is for the medium level of difficulty, I think 80-85% is good. For hard questions, if you're able to get even a 70% accuracy, it's fine. And for easy questions, I hope you've been able to get about 85 to 90% accuracy. So I don't think if you're able to score an 80% accuracy, it should not be a problem. Or did you mean that you're not getting 80%? So if you're not getting 80%, first of all, you need to see whether you are following the right method of reading. We'll discuss that today, the right method of reading. So I'll just mute myself, guys. I want you to read this passage. How much time should I give you guys to read this passage properly? You can offer your opinions. Nazi, I'm going to explain how to read to get most out of the passage. But first, I'll let all of you read this passage the way you normally read it, Then you'll be able to compare how I read it and how you read it. All right. So I would give all of you guys a chance to read it. So Shalini says 3 minutes. Shubham says 4. Ishwar says 4. Guys, some more. Akash says 2.5 minutes. Nazi says 3 to 4. I think I'll be fair to all of you. I'm going to give you 4 minutes. Your time starts now. Read in whatever way you're currently reading your passages so that you can see the difference when I read the same passage. Okay? Your time starts now. 4 minutes it is. You're welcome, Nazi. I'm going to mute myself in between. For those of you who've just joined us, I want you guys to read this passage. There are 2 more minutes to go. I had given in all 4 minutes, and then I'm going to bring up the question related to this passage. Time to read the passage is up, and here is the question that I want you guys to attempt based on this passage. You have another 1 minute to attempt this question, and let me bring up the poll for this. right, time is up, guys. So I'm going to start. I'll count 5. And if you haven't already put in your answers, please do so. So here goes my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So I'm going to end the polls now. All right. Let's take a quick look at what you guys have chosen. So 30% of you believe the correct answer is A. None of you have opted for B. 38% of you believe C is the correct answer. And 15% each believe that D and E are the answers. All right, guys. So again, the motive is not so much to check as to whether you got the answer correct, but to check whether you got it the right way. Did you read the passage the right way? In fact, what is the right way to read the passage? Because you will be getting such kind of passages definitely on the GMAT. So let me get started, guys. While I discuss how to read, please hold on to any questions if you have regarding this question. I'll give you opportunity to ask your query. So let me get started. Okay. So the first thing that we do at GMATWhiz is make sure that we don't read the passage in a hurry. If you notice, I was okay with giving all of you 4 minutes to read this 3-paragraph passage. Why? And you would have also noticed I just gave you 1 minute to answer the question, because that's the idea. You devote more time to reading and understanding the passage so that you are able to reduce the time taken to answer the question. Why? Because you would have less doubts. All right. So let's get started to understand how to read better. Now, how to read better starts with how you read one sentence and then how you connect the next few sentences. All right. So how to read one sentence, we start teaching that through our SC course, where we tell you to break down and read. That's what I'm going to do here as well. So let me get started. Recent feminist scholarship. Now, if you're not very comfortable, or if you're not very, if you haven't read too many GMAT passages, you would confuse the word scholarship with the kind of scholarship that students know, the monetary scholarship. But if you are a regular with the OG passages, you would see that the word scholarship in GMAT is used in terms of, often used in terms of studies. So let's say that you don't know what scholarship means, but we are going to kind of focus on the context to understand the meaning of the word scholarship here. So recent feminist scholarship concerning the US in the 1920s. Okay, so this part is telling me what this scholarship is about. This scholarship is about the time in 1920s. All right, my bad, I shouldn't have marked here. Okay, so this is a modifier for scholarship. So this recent feminist scholarship challenges. Now I'll focus on this because clearly it is telling me there is an opinion to be understood here. Challenges means disagrees. All right. So this recent feminist thing disagrees, okay, with what? Challenges earlier interpretations. Earlier would mean probably before 1920s. Interpretations made about something maybe. So what are these interpretations? Interpretations that assessed. So we have a relative pronoun clause here. These interpretations of before the 1920s, assessed means examined the 20s, that means the 1920s, in terms of unkept promises of the women's suffrage movement. Now, if you don't know the word suffrage, please don't panic. All you need to remember is there would be context given later on for you to understand this word suffrage. But for now, we are saying that it is something related to women's movement. It's a type of women's movement. And earlier interpretations examined this time as a time which did not keep the promises of women's movement. So if I kind of reduce the meaning of this sentence, okay, it means the new scholarship okay, questions, disagrees, challenges the old idea. Earlier interpretation, I'm calling this the old idea. Okay, I'm calling this the new feminist idea because it's recent. And the old idea, what was the old idea doing? The old idea examined the 20s in light of what was not achieved by women's suffrage movement. How do I know not achieved? Because we're talking about unkept promises. So when you simplify a sentence in your own words, you are understanding the full gist of it. Here we have the new scholarship against the old scholarship. Old scholarship did not, it tried to examine the 1920s, that period, by what was not achieved by women's movement, and the scholarship challenges that idea. So if the new scholarship is challenging that idea, it means it is not agreeing that something was not achieved by women's suffrage movement. All right, so we're going to come to that. But before I proceed, guys, I want all of you to let me know that are you able to follow how I broke the sentence, how I connected the various pieces of the sentence, and how I drew the meaning of this one sentence? Were you guys able to understand that? Were you guys able to understand how I broke the sentence into segments and joined the pieces and drew the understanding that the new scholarship is against the old scholarship? Wonderful. Now, so what I have done here is I have tried to derive what the sentence is saying and who is saying it. Okay. So I have tried to derive the what and the who for this sentence. I cannot derive the why because this is the first sentence of the passage. Let me go to the next sentence. Okay. This new scholarship disputes. Okay, so we are going to continue to discuss what the new feminist scholarship disagrees with. The long held view. Okay, so the long held view is the old idea. That again, after that, we are going to talk about the old idea. So whatever is going to follow this, that will be the old view, and the new scholarship is disputing again with that view. What is the old view? Because a women's voting bloc did not materialize after the women gained the right to vote, suffrage failed. Now, can you understand the meaning of the word suffrage? It has got something to do with voting rights. All right. So when we talk about women's suffrage movement, we are probably talking about women's voting rights movement, a movement which probably saw the women getting the right to vote. All right. And the old view believes that because this voting bloc did not really, develop, that means even after women gained the right to vote in 1920, there was no voting bloc of the women that developed. And because of that, they believe suffrage failed to produce any long-term gain for women. So again, the new scholarship disagrees with the old idea. And the old idea is what? The old idea is WSM failed to achieve long-term political benefits for women because there was no women's voting bloc that developed. So now, if I connect these two sentences, all I have is that the new scholarship disagrees with the old idea. The old idea believes women's suffrage movement was a failure. New scholarship does not think so. All right, see how I have connected the why. Okay, so I keep connecting the sentences as I read. All right, let me read the third sentence. These feminist scholars also challenge. Okay, so we are still continuing with the disputing, the challenging, the disagreement. The also challenge the old view that. So again, after that, I have another. So this is one old view here. This is another old view here. This is another old view here. This old view pronounced suffrage a failure for not delivering on the promise that the women's vote would bring about moral, corruption-free government. Okay, so the old view thought that suffrage did not remove corruption, suffrage did not bring about moral government or moral governments. All right, and again, the new feminist scholarship disagrees with that. So new scholarship disagrees with the old idea. that women's suffrage movement failed to fulfill the promise. So basically, if you remember, the new scholarship does not believe that the promises were not kept. So if I kind of sum up these three sentences, what I get is that new scholarship likely believes that WSM wasn't the total failure. It was believed to be by the old view. All right. From here till here, I have now summarized the whole thing. Asked whether women's suffrage was a failure, these scholars cite the words of some social reformer. And what did the social reformer say? Why don't you ask if suffrage in general? So not just women's suffrage, that is voting in general is failing. So that means these scholars are of the opinion that it's not so much that women's suffrage was failing, it was that the whole idea of voting was failing, probably including men's voting. So summary of this passage is the author talks about the various aspects of the old view that were challenged by the new feminist scholarship. So I focused on the three W's: what, who, why. Every sentence I simplified the what, I noted down who said it, and I connected why it was being said. And then I kind of summarized the paragraph. So this is the process of involved and evolved reading, guys. Let me know if this is clear to all of you. Yes, Akansha, you can go ahead and ask your question. In the meantime, guys, I'll bring up a poll and ask you guys if the explanation, if the process, all of this is clear to all of you. So unkept promises, Akansha, here would refer to the moral, corruption-free governance, long-term political gains, all those things probably were promised. And probably, according to the old view, those were not kept, not met, not fulfilled. But the new feminist scholarship doesn't agree with that. So Akansha, let me know if I have answered your query. The others seem to have understood this quite well. Wonderful. So this is the summary of the first paragraph. Now we also have two shorter paragraphs to assess before we move on. Now remember, whatever you have understood from the first para, you carry into the second para. So from the first para, we've understood that the new scholarship does not agree with the old scholarship. Let's get going. So Akash has asked a very pertinent question. During the exam with the time constraint, it becomes difficult to analyze the passage. Akash, you have to develop this skill. Okay, I agree with you. When you first start reading like this, you are kind of forcing yourself to connect these dots. But when you are following this process day in and day out for say 10 days, 15 days, you are able to internalize the process. You do it automatically. Then it doesn't take so much time. So of course, RC is not like your quant or even sentence correction where you just learn the rules and you can show some result for that. It takes time. You will have to be patient, Akash. So you cannot do it in 2 days. I agree with that. Shalini is asking, whatever follows that would belong to the antecedent. Yes, Shalini. Whatever, if your that is the relative pronoun clause, then the antecedent will be what follows before it. So earlier interpretations that, long-held view that, old view that, absolutely. So Akansha says you had difficulty in equating unkept promise. So Akansha, as you move to the second sentence, suppose you read the first sentence that old view believed that promises were not kept. And when you move to the second sentence and you say that voting bloc did not materialize, so that could be a part of unkept promises. Perhaps it was promised that women would be able to develop their own voting bloc, but that did not happen as an outcome of the suffrage movement. So you keep relating to the previous sentence to understand. All right, Akansha. Ishwar, you don't have to write down, honestly. I'm not really a big fan of making too many notes. In fact, in the exam, I would just write one or two, phrases here. I would just keep saying, okay, new scholarship doesn't agree with the old, doesn't agree with the old, doesn't agree with the old. So perhaps in the exam, Ishwar, I would maximum I would perhaps write this part and this part, nothing else. Okay? Noting down too many things takes away your concentration. You have maybe initially when you involved and evolved reading, which is what this is, then you can maybe make notes. But as you proceed further into this, when your skills are developed, you perhaps won't need to write this. You should do it mentally, yes. You can just write down a few takeaways as I've told you, and then the rest of it should be in your head. You should map the passage well so that you know where to go back to for reference. So Nazi is asking the role of the last sentence. The role of the last sentence is to further cast doubt on the old view. Remember, this question is being cited by these scholars who disagree with the old view. So this sentence is also trying to cast a doubt on the old view. The old view is women's suffrage did not work. This, the new scholars are asking, the feminist scholars are asking them, it's not about women's suffrage not working, it's about total failure of suffrage. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Nazi. You're welcome, guys. Ishwar, Akansha, Shalini, all of you. Wonderful questions, and that shows how closely you are following the methodology. Trust me, guys, this method works. Like, I'm not saying this because I am with GMATWhiz. I'm saying this because this entire course I have developed, and I have developed it after focusing and listening and trying to solve the problems faced by students. In fact, let me share the free trial link with all of you in the chat box, so that if you want to take a closer peek at our course, you can do so by using that link, guys. All right. So let me get to the second passage. Second paragraph. Here I go. The second paragraph is a very short paragraph here, from here till here. Nonetheless, in some ways, however, now this however is what we call a transition word. And whenever there is a transition word, always make note of it. Make special note of it, because there is a shift of view there. It could be the shift in view of the author. It could be a shift of view of maybe a third-party opinion, anything. So you note this. In some ways, however, these scholars still present the 1920s as a period of decline. Now, what is the meaning of this, however? Now, remember, in the previous paragraph, we were saying that new scholars disagree with old view. Okay, and old view was women's suffrage movement failed. So new scholars, if they challenge the old view, it means they thought that women's suffrage movement succeeded. So despite the previous paragraph, in this paragraph, the author is telling, however, that means despite believing that women's suffrage movement was not a failure, these scholars still present the 1920s as a period of decline. So that means here we are basically saying that the author's opinion is, although new scholarship believes that women's suffrage movement wasn't the total failure it was believed to be, new scholarship still shows, this is important, new scholarship to a certain extent still shows 1920s to be a period of decline. Why? Let's read on. After suffrage, they argue. So who will this they refer to? This they would refer to these scholars, the new feminist scholars. So the author is going to tell us why the new feminist scholars still believe that 1920s was a period of decline. They argue that the feminist movement lost its cohesiveness. If you don't know the meaning of cohesiveness, don't worry. But if you do know, cohesiveness means lost its togetherness, lost its unity, and gender consciousness waned. So the whole thing about women's movement, women's suffrage, that whole consciousness went on a decline. After the mid-1920s, few successes means hardly any successes, could be claimed by the feminist reformers. And more explanation of that is given after the colon here. Little could be seen in the way of legislative victories. So all in all, this short paragraph is telling us about the author's opinion. The author's opinion is, sorry, my bad. The author's opinion is about the new scholarship, and the new scholarship believes that 1920s really wasn't that great. So now you are likely to think that perhaps in part it agrees with the old view. It definitely challenges some concepts of the old view, but here we have it kind of also partly agreeing with the old view. Let's move on. During this decade, however, again a shift. So this was all about the new feminist scholars. In this paragraph, we notice that nobody has been mentioned. Then whose view is it? It has to be the author's view. Here we are talking about the author's opinion. Author is saying during this decade means the 1920s. However, there was intense activism aimed at achieving increased autonomy for women. So the author believes that there was some activism to increase self-governance for women, broadening the spheres within which they live their daily lives. So the author believes something good was happening in that one decade. Women's organizations worked to establish opportunities for women. Okay, so there was something happening for women. They strove to secure for women full entitlements, full rights of citizenship, including the right to hold office and the right to serve on juries. Okay, so that means the author here believes that the period wasn't a total failure. So you see, in the first paragraph, new feminist scholars, okay, against old view. In the second paragraph, new feminist scholars kind of partially agree with the old view. And in the third paragraph, author doesn't agree with the new feminist scholars plus the old view. So here I can infer that, pay attention to, this is something that you might want to write down, that unlike the new feminist scholars who believe 20s was a period of failure for the WSM, author believes that 1920s did see some achievement. So guys, let me know if this is clear to all of you. I will just put up a poll for this. Let me know if all this method of reading is absolutely clear. So Pratik, thank you for posting that. Pratik says he has been following this technique since 1 month and it has actually been helping him. Still struggling to take out meaning in one single attempt, but has finally reduced the frequency of revisits. You're most welcome, Pratik. I'm just so glad this has helped you. And thank you for sharing this with all of us, Pratik, because I need people to believe in this, not just because I am saying it, but because somebody who's used it is saying it. So thank you so much, Akash, for that. All the best for you for your exam. You'll have to be a little, I think it was you who said you have the exam on Tuesday, right? Yes. So all the best. Just go over your error logs. Wonderful, guys. Now that we have established this whole thing. Actually, guys, I can see some of you haven't understood something. So please post your query. If something is not clear to you, please post your query. Some of you have answered that you haven't understood, the explanation is not clear. So if you want, you can post your query. I'll be glad to answer. Yes, I will explain the first sentence of the second paragraph. Now see, you have to connect the first sentence of the second paragraph with the last sentence of the first paragraph. So let me just show you that. Let me just take you back to the, yeah. Now here in this paragraph, okay, we are talking about recent feminist scholarship, okay, challenging the old view that found suffrage a failure, okay, and most of it is talking about suffrage as a failure. So recent feminist scholarship believe women's suffrage movement was not the failure, okay, believed by old view. Rather, they believe that suffrage as an overall thing might have failed. This is what the last sentence is saying. The however contradicts this part, that despite the fact that they are saying old view is wrong, despite the fact that they're challenging the old view, the new feminist scholars still present 1920s as decline. All right, so that's the meaning of the first sentence of the second paragraph. Does that clear up your issue, Nancy? So yes, Ishwar, in the second paragraph, the author is providing opinions of the scholars, and in the third paragraph, the author is providing his own opinion. His own opinion, okay? Third paragraph is not about somebody else's opinion. So Ishwar, Nazi, and the others, do let me know if things are clearer now. Are things all clear now to all of you? Wonderful. Now let's answer that question, okay? So let me take you back to the question. Hold on a second. Yeah. So the summary of this paragraph is, let me put it together. Okay. The first paragraph summary, if we go back, let me just bring it all together for you. This was the summary of the first paragraph. Author talks about various aspects of the old view that were challenged by the new feminist scholarship. And in the second paragraph, the author is saying, although new scholarship still shows 1920s to be a period of decline, the author believes that 1920s did see some achievement. With that, let's go to the question. Now, the question is, let's focus on the question first, guys. It can be inferred that the author of the passage disagrees with the new scholarship regarding what? Okay. So the new scholarship mentioned in the highlighted lines. The highlighted lines was the first passage, all right? And in that, the author disagrees with the new scholarship on which point? Regarding means on which point? Now, let's pre-think about it. Author's opinion was new scholarship believes that WSM wasn't a total failure. This was there, okay, in the first paragraph. But, okay, although this is there, new scholarship still was 1920s to be a period of decline. And then this was about the new scholarship. And what is the author's opinion? The period wasn't a total failure. So basically, we get it that the author disagrees with the new scholarship regarding how much the WSM was a failure, to what extent WSM was a failure. This is the point on which the author, okay, disagrees with it. The new feminist scholars believe it was a failure, and the author believes it wasn't that big a failure. So guys, do you understand so far? Do you understand so far? Because now we are going to just eliminate the options after our pre-thinking. Yes, Nancy. Great. So now guys, if I ask you to answer this question again, let me restart the poll. I'm giving all of you a chance to answer this question again. So Shalini, explain what? Okay, you want me to explain this question. See, Shalini, the question stem is asking you, author disagrees with the new scholarship over which point? And the point of disagreement is, the new scholarship believes that WSM did fail, 1920s was a period of decline. The author says the period wasn't a total failure because there were some successes that were achieved by the feminist movement. So that is what the author believes, that it wasn't a total failure. And the new feminist scholars believe it did fail. Okay, so you have the chance to answer this question again. There's a good tip here I will offer, always find a reason to eliminate the choice. So focus on the process of elimination rather than the process of selection. If you don't have a reason for eliminating something, hold on to it. If you have a reason for eliminating, remove it. So I'm going to count 5 and then end the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, guys, now we will compare the second poll results to the first poll results, okay? And I want you guys to note it down for yourselves at least. When you first answered this question, 30% of you believed that A was the answer. Now only 16% believe A is the answer. Earlier also B was not chosen by anybody. This time also nobody has chosen B. Earlier 38% of you chose C. That number has almost doubled to 66% of you. And that goes a long way to show how, if you have understood the passage clearly, you can answer the question correctly. Earlier, 15% of people believed D was the answer. Now there is a small increase there. 16% of you believe D, but not much. And nobody now thinks E is the answer. Earlier, 15% of you believed E was the answer. So guys, let me help you consolidate this. Remember, the disagreement is to what extent WSM was a failure. So degree to which the promises remain unkept. This comes close. But remember, the author doesn't refer to the promises directly. Okay. The author definitely doesn't say that the new feminist scholars are completely wrong. Okay. But what the author says is something was achieved. So the degree of achievement, but not the degree of what the promises weren't kept. It is about the degree of what, to what extent the women's suffrage movement was a failure. All right. Not just about the promises unkept. So this is too narrow, the first option, and therefore it is incorrect. Only the new scholarship is questioning this. The author is not questioning this. Nobody marked B, and it is not the answer because only the new scholarship is questioning the morality of the governance and all that. The degree to which the 1920s represented a period of decline, remember this is the between the third paragraph, okay, and the second paragraph and the third paragraph. So this was the second paragraph, this was the third paragraph. All right, and this is the correct answer. This is per our free thinking. Degree of legislative success achieved by, so only the author talks about only the new scholarship questions the legislative success, right? It says that long-term political gains were not there. This is something that only new scholarship questions. So this is also not the answer. And of course, the voting block thing was also only the new scholarships questioning. The author had no opinion to offer for these points. The author only had an opinion about was it a total decline or was it not a total decline. All right. So it's the degree to which it represented a period of decline. And that is why this is the correct answer. Guys, do let me know if this is clear. If you have any queries, you can ask. But I think by now it should be clear why the other choices are close, but not the correct answer. Okay. However, we did see a doubling of the correct answer choice on the poll because I was through with the passage. I explained the passage to you. So if you understand the passage properly, there is no reason you will not improve on the questions. All right. So let me bring up, thank you for that. Let me bring up another question on this passage itself. But before that, please remember, guys, you need to build the right skills. Like you need to know where to pause, how to understand the meaning of complex words. I explained to you how to look at the word suffrage and understand it talks about voting, not to panic. Noting where we are given facts, where we are given opinions, where is the author's opinion and where is somebody else's opinion. we need to understand the intent of the passage and the paragraphs. All right. And we have devoted almost 10 hours to just building the right reading skills on the course. So I've already shared the link to the free trial version of the course, guys, which you can avail of. All right. We show you, there is a whole, portion of the course which is dedicated to understanding, how to note the opinions, the purpose of noting the opinions, because you have a lot of questions on them. And here is another question from the same passage for all of you guys. So let me just keep myself quiet. I'll give you 1.5 minutes for this because you might need to revisit the paragraph. I've been talking so much. You might have lost track of it. Yes, Nirmala, I will quickly share the link. In fact, guys, I'm going to share 2 links with you. I'm going to share the link to the free trial version of the course, which you can check out. You can get to know more about our course. And if you are at different stages of your preparation, you feel that your score is not moving, or you don't know what to do next, what steps to take next, you can book a free call with our strategy experts. I have shared the link for that as well in the chat. You can use that link to connect with our experts to resolve your issues regarding the preparation. Even if you haven't started the prep and you have some queries, you can connect with them. So guys, I'll mute myself. You have 1.5 minutes for this question. Right, guys, time up. So I'm just going to quickly count 5 once again. If you haven't put in your polls, please do that. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Wonderful, guys. So it seems that explaining the passage did help, understanding of the passage did help. 60% of you have chosen A, which is the correct answer. I'll discuss in a moment. 10% of you have chosen B, none of you have chosen C, 10% D, and 20% E. That goes a long way to show how better understanding of the passage can really, really be helpful. So let's look at the question quickly. It can be inferred that the analysis of the author of the passage. So we are referring to, this is the analysis of the author per se, and the scholars mentioned in the highlighted text differ on which point. Once again, you have a similar question, right? That the author's analysis and the feminist scholars, on what point do they differ? Now, we have it that these scholars still present 20s as a period of decline. Okay. They believe that few successes could be claimed. All right. Little could be seen in way of legislative victories. This is their viewpoint. And let's see what the author says about these things. For example, the author does believe that there was increased autonomy for women. There was a broadening of the spheres within which they lived their lives. There were organizations at work. Women got full entitlements of citizenship, right to hold office, right to serve jury. So we are talking about, again, if you remember the previous question, we were talking about how much, did it decline and how much did it achieve. Now, if you see, the author uses autonomy as a point of achievement. The author uses gaining entitlements as a point of achievement. The author kind of says that there were organizations working to achieve. On the other hand, if you see, the scholars are basically talking about legislative victories, okay, and saying that hardly any success was, kind of got. So the feminist scholars are not arguing over the same points as the author. They are not arguing over autonomy. They are not arguing over full entitlements of citizenship. So it seems that the two are kind of differing over what is considered a success and what is not considered a success. So with that pre-thinking, let's move to the answer choice. The criteria they use to evaluate. So we are looking at the point of difference. So A, B, C, D, E are supposed to be the point of difference. So is the point of difference the criteria they use to examine the success of feminist movement? Yes. They are using autonomy as the criteria. Sorry, the author is using autonomy as the criteria, entitlements as the criteria. They are, the feminist scholars are just looking at, gender consciousness, suffrage, legislative victories as criteria. So I'm going to hold on to A. I don't know if A is the correct answer. This is the way I would solve in the exam. I don't have a reason to eliminate A. Their interpretations of the promises of the suffragists. Now, the author doesn't disagree about their interpretation. Mind it, the author nowhere says that their interpretation was wrong. Okay? The new feminist scholars disagree with that. The suggestions they make for achieving, no, neither of them, nowhere in the passage we are talking about what to do to achieve feminist goals. So this is totally out. Definition of what is a legislative victory. The term legislative victories was used only by the feminist scholars, not by the authors. So that's not common. Their estimations of the obstacles preventing. I don't think anybody has made an estimate of the obstacles. Estimate of the obstacles means, okay, what are the things that prevented the women from achieving the voting bloc? Okay, nowhere we have discussed what stopped women from achieving the voting bloc. Okay, women did not win too many legislative victories, that's fine. But what about the voting bloc? So nobody discusses that. And therefore, A is the closest to the correct answer. Most of you got that correct, so good. Let me know if all of you are clear with this explanation so that we can move to the second passage of the evening, a new passage. Let me know if all is clear, guys. Mostly, I want you to tell me if the method of involved and evolved reading, we call it the involved and evolved reading at GMATWhiz. And it literally means you involve yourself with the author, you think like the author, you're like in a conversation with the author, trying to understand what the author is saying. Great. So let me see. Okay. Here comes the next passage, guys. Again, I'm going to give you, in fact, this passage is a slightly longer passage. You're welcome, fellow. So how much time should I give you guys for this passage? Tell me. It's a slightly longer, a slightly more dense passage. So how much time should I give you guys to just read this passage and draw your conclusions, draw your own understanding? I can give you as much time as you want because I want you to try out at least the involved and evolved meaning approach. Okay. So guys, I am absolutely, so Naji says 5 to 6 minutes. What about the others? How much time do you guys want? Shantani says 3 minutes. You'll need more than that, Shantani, definitely. If you want to read this right, remember, please don't squeeze time on reading the passage. If it's a hard passage, you will need time. If you don't devote that time, you're going to falter. Okay, Anupam says 4 minutes is enough. Okay, I think most of you want that 4 minute. All right, let me do something. Let me give you that 5th minute as well because it's, in my opinion, you'll need it. All right, this passage isn't a very easy one, although it looks easy. So remember to connect the 3 W's. What is the line saying? Who is saying it? Why is it being said? Okay, you have 5 minutes. Your time starts now. I'm going to mute myself in the meantime. All right, guys. So your time's up as far as reading goes. I'm just going to bring up the question. This is the first question that you need to solve for this particular passage. Let me also bring up the polls. So you have 1 minute to sort this question. Right, I'm going to count 5 and end the polls. If you haven't put in your answers, please do that. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Sometimes the language of the answer choices have to be also understood the way you understand, your when you're solving your sentence correction questions. The way you understand the difference between two options. They are saying the same thing and yet not saying the same thing. So this case is also similar to that. Okay, let me end the poll. 10% of you have marked A as the correct answer. 50% of you believe B is the correct answer. 20% of you believe C is the correct answer, and 10% each believe D and E. So basically, one big chunk is with B, and the rest of you are divided over the other options. And yeah, so let's see if most of you are correct or not. But before that, guys, can you, like, how many of y'all believe that reading, how many of y'all actually tried the involved and evolved reading approach in this passage? How many of y'all tried that? And let's be honest, if you tried that, yes. If you did not try, no, not an issue. It's not something which comes to you in one go. So how many of y'all tried the involved and evolved reading approach? Okay, so seems most of you did, and I get it if you were not able to do it also, that's also okay. Here's the second question. So how many of y'all feel that the involved and evolved reading gave you a better understanding? How many of y'all feel that you had a better understanding because you were reading in a certain manner? Great. I want you guys to understand that gradually increasing your practice of this method is going to lead you to develop a skill which is going to last you all your life, not just the GMAT. Okay, wonderful. So let me get started with the analysis of the passage. It's a huge chunk of a paragraph, so I'm kind of going to read from sentence to sentence. So the first sentence, as I see, starts here and ends here. Let's see what it says. Because the framers of the US Constitution believed something. So we are going to talk about the belief of the framers. The framers believed that protecting property rights relating to inventions would encourage new nations' economic growth. All right, so because of this belief, so I'm going to connect this. This is very important. This is a transition word. Because framers believed something, okay, they did something. What did they do? We'll read that. They gave Congress, okay, this is what they did. They gave Congress, and Congress was the national legislative body probably, a constitutional mandate to grant patents. So basically, if I shortlist this sentence, it really means that framers of the US Constitution thought that patenting inventions would boost nations' economic growth. So you need to simplify a sentence. Remember what I said again? The 3 W's. What, who, and why. So what is this? Who is this? Why, for the first sentence, as I've said, you can only guess. The why comes later. Okay, great. Now let's move on to the next sentence. The resulting patent system. Okay, so the patent system which developed as a outcome of this belief of the framers, this patent system has served as a model for those in other nations. Now, is it really important? Not really. It's just telling me that the patent system has been something that other countries have also followed. Has served, present perfect, that means still following. Recently, however, now that's a transition word for me. Okay, so recently something has happened which is contradictory probably. Scholars have questioned, okay, so scholars disagree about something, whether the American system helped achieve the framers' goals. Okay, what was the framers' goal? Framers' goal was inventions would encourage the new nation's growth, right? This was the framers' goal. And scholars are questioning whether the American system has helped to achieve this goal. So that means the scholars don't think that the patent system really helped to achieve the new nation's economic growth. All right. So scholars have questioned the achievement of the goal, which means, okay, they have questioned the achievement of the goal. These scholars have contended. So now the author is going to tell us what these scholars have said while questioning the achievement of that goal. Let's see. These scholars have contended that from this period to this period, all right, American inventors were unable to enforce property rights. Okay, so that is why they believe that this entire system of patent failed to achieve economic growth, because they believe that American inventors couldn't even enforce this property right. Why? Judges were anti-patent, and routinely invalidated patents for arbitrary, random reasons. Okay. So these scholars believe that the patent system failed in achieving the growth because judges were against patents, they were anti-patent, and they actually ruled out patents for random reasons. Their reasoning also was not proper. Okay. So I have simplified such a huge paragraph. Now, I mean, I want you guys to notice that from here till here, this long chunk, I have been able to just reduce it to 2 short phrases or sentences or whatever you call. Okay. So I have again, who is saying? Scholars. All right. What are they saying? This. And why has the author of this passage given us these two? Probably the author also wants us to understand whether the goal was achieved or not achieved, and what these scholars are saying. Perhaps later on the author is going to talk more about it. Let's move on. This argument, which argument? That the judges are anti-patent. So you need to connect as you move along. Remember, this argument means the anti-patent argument, the invalidated for arbitrary reasons argument, is based partly on examination of court decisions. So these scholars must have examined the court decisions, and based on that, they came to the conclusion that the judges were anti-patent, or they invalidated patents for arbitrary reasons. Let's see these decisions in cases. Which cases? Where patent holders brought suit alleging infringements of their rights. All right. So basically, where patentees were trying to enforce their patent rights, and they examined the decision that was given in such cases. In the 1820s, for instance, 75% of the verdict was against the patentee. Okay, so this is the reason, because 75% of the verdict, okay, was against patentees. That is why these scholars believe that the judges were anti-patent. That is why they believe that the patent system did not achieve the goal of encouraging the national economic growth. Okay. See how I'm connecting with the previous sentence. The proportion of verdicts for the patentee began to increase. Okay, so in the 1820s, 75% was against the patentee. After that, in the 1830s, the proportion of verdicts for the patentee began to increase. So now, instead of just 75, instead of only 25% of the verdict being in favor of patentees, now after the 1830s, the proportion began to increase. So this part is a fact, guys, okay? This part is a fact. And this part is the fact used by these scholars to say something, suggesting to these scholars that judicial attitude toward patent rights began shifting then. So we are summing up that scholars' argument is based on the court decisions in 1820s, 75% were against the patentees. And then the scholars believe that judges' attitude towards patents changed in 1830s. So that's the summary of this paragraph. That scholars believe patents did not achieve their objective because the judges before 1830 were anti-patent, and it was only after 1830 that their attitude changed. Let me know how many of y'all understood this passage, this paragraph in this manner. Let me put up a poll for this, guys. So how many of y'all have understood this passage, this paragraph like this only? How many of y'all have the same understanding? You have to realize for yourselves that what are the things that you are still not doing, what is holding you back from getting that full understanding. Please, guys, trust me, you will have to give this skill time to build. It's not something that you can learn overnight or even in just one session. If you're not patient with yourself, if you give up too early, you will never realize the full gains of this. And given that in GMAT, RCs play a very, very important role. After the sentence correction questions, they have the highest weightage. You need to do well here. Okay, wonderful, guys. So let's move to the second paragraph. Okay, let me also ask, is this clear, guys? Is this paragraph clear to all of you? Cool. So earlier, the judges were anti-patent according to the scholars, and later on the attitude of the judges began to change. This is what we have understood from this paragraph. Let's see what the author says. So far, nowhere we have the author's opinion, mind it. If you notice, scholars, framers, scholars, okay? Nowhere we have the author's opinion in the first paragraph. Not all patent disputes in the early centuries were litigated, however. Now, who is saying this? Here we have the author's opinion, okay? And litigated cases were not drawn randomly from the population of disputes. So the author here is telling us that the data that is offered above, okay, about those patent disputes and the number of cases and the number of verdicts, all right, all these litigated cases are not basically representative of the population of disputes. And therefore, the rate of verdict cannot be used. Now, this is important. The rate of verdicts in favor of patentees cannot be used by itself to gauge changes in judicial attitudes. What does it mean? Remember, scholars believe judicial attitudes changed The author does not believe judicial attitudes changed, because the author is saying just because the verdict rate changed, you cannot say that the judicial attitude changed, because the litigated cases were not represented properly. All right. If early judicial decisions were prejudiced, so remember, it was the scholars who it were the scholars it was the scholars who were saying that early judicial decisions were anti-patent. All right, the judges were giving random reasons for invalidating the patents. So author here is kind of trying to probably cross that out and saying that if early judicial decisions were biased, one might expect that subsequent courts, that means the later courts, would reject the former legal precedents. Precedents, if you don't know the meaning, don't worry. But former legal precedents, former legal would refer to the former decisions, right? So the author is saying that if the former decisions were prejudiced, then the courts which came later, they would reject those former verdicts. However, again a transition word, but the pre-1813 cases have been cited as frequently as later decisions. They continue to be cited today, suggesting that early decisions were just a recompense of inventive ingenuity, providing a lasting foundation for patent law. So clearly here the author agrees, or rather says, that had the judges been biased, then the decisions would have been rejected by later courts. That was not the case. Later courts were using it and they are still using it today. All right. So clearly the author is against the scholars. Scholars believe, I'm going to write it here. Scholars believe attitudes changed. Okay. Author disagrees. Is this clear? How I have derived this, is this clear? Let me know, guys, if this is clear. That in the previous paragraph, we had the scholars believing that attitudes changed in the 1830s. The last sentence of the first paragraph, Nazi, is saying that the number of failures decreased in 1830. Yes. So guys, let me know if this is clear. Wonderful. So scholars believe that attitudes changed in 1830. Author doesn't agree. Author believes that since the earlier judgments were used in later cases, no changes really happened. Okay. So this is your takeaway in the inference that you can draw. The proportion of judicial decisions in favor of patentees began to increase during the 1830s because, so author is probably going to give us the real reason why the judicial decisions began to increase in the favor of patentees. All right. It began to change because of a change in the underlying population of the cases. This change was partly due to a revision to the patent system. And what was the patent system's revision? The examination procedure was instituted in which the application was scrutinized for the patent law. Earlier, the patents were automatically granted by just paying a $30 fee. So earlier, the patents were not scrutinized. In 1836, a revision was made, and after that, these applications began to be scrutinized. And that is the real reason the author is citing behind the increase in the verdicts in favor of the patentees. So the summary is, judges prior to the 1830s were never really biased against the patents. Their verdicts have been used as precedents since then. All right. So let me know if this is clear to all of you guys. So clearly between the first paragraph and the second paragraph, we have the scholar's opinions and the author's opinion. Underlying population means underlying population, underlying number of cases. Okay. Underlying population of cases simply means underlying number of cases, the number of cases, all right, that were there. Okay, so let me now go to the question. The question is saying the author is likely to agree with the idea. Okay, let me bring up the poll again for you guys. If you want to change your opinion, if you don't want to change, please stick to it. Just because I'm asking you to poll again doesn't mean that I'm asking all of you to change your opinion. Okay, look at this question. Take another 30 seconds to see what you want to mark. I can see most of you divided between B and C. Obviously, only one of them is the answer. So pay very close attention. Pay very close attention to the language of the two options. So I'm going to end the poll now. Earlier, 10% of you had chosen A. Now, none of you are choosing A. Good. A is not the answer. Earlier, 50% of you had chosen B. Now, 62% of you believe B is the correct answer. Let's see. Earlier, only 20% of you had chosen C. Now, 25% of you believe C could be the answer. Earlier, 10% went for D. Now, 12% go for D. Earlier, 10% voted for E. Now, nobody votes for E. Definitely, there has been a shift towards the better. So let's see. It's really between B and C, guys, and the language. Okay, pay attention to the language as I explained. So A, no one has marked and it is not the answer. Okay, the author is likely to agree with the idea. So the author is likely to agree with which idea? One, we have it that, have I done any pre-thinking here? Yeah. So the summary of the second paragraph where the author's opinion really is that judges prior to 1830s were never really biased, right? This is one part. And for that, the author says that the verdicts have been quoted later on as well. So that means this part is matching with this. Judges' support for patent rights did not increase after 30. It was never biased. That is why, okay, we can indicate that the judges' support did not increase. All right. It was never biased to start off in the first place. Therefore, it never increased. Returning to judicial standards that prevailed before 1830. Just because they were citing the verdict does not mean they returned to the judicial standards. There was no return. Okay, there was no going back. They cited those earlier verdicts, but it's not that they went back to the earlier standards. The passage is not saying some two different standards were followed. All right. So the correct answer here, all right, is very clearly choice B. Most of you have chosen this. Again, remember, how do we know that judicial support did not increase? Because we are saying it was never really biased to begin with. See how I've derived it. Okay. This is the last sentence of the first paragraph, which says proportion of verdicts began to increase in 1830. So this is a fact. And the author does not deny this fact. But this is the part which the author is against. Author says that the decisions were used later today also. So the judicial attitude did not begin to shift from this to this. So guys, let me know if this explanation is clear to all of you. I will just put up a poll for that. Do let me know if this explanation is clear to all of you. Is it clear how we arrived at this answer? And again, remember, look at the language. You know, when you say courts have returned to judicial standards, they were there before 1830, it sounds as if they are using the verdict. But actually, verdict and judicial standards are not the same. If you have any queries, please ask, guys. Remember, verdict, okay, before 1830s, and judicial standards. A standard is not a verdict. Standards before 1830s. The author is talking about this, not about this. Okay, and therefore, the courts did not return to judicial standards. They returned to the judicial verdicts. So please let me know if this is clear to all of you. Why B is the answer and not C? Because the fight was really between B and C. Wonderful. Let me bring up the next question for all of you on this passage itself. So we have already discussed this. Here's the next question. I think a lot of you may not have understood the question stem in this case. So perhaps those of you who are struggling to eliminate the incorrect options and choose the right one, maybe you should look at the question stem more closely. The question stem is saying it can be inferred from the passage that the author and the scholars referred to in the highlighted line. Now, the scholars referred to in the highlighted line does not mean that you have to draw the data from the highlighted line. Please understand that. It's only that those are the scholars that we are talking about. Okay. So those scholars who believe that the attitude started to change after 1830, those scholars and the author disagree about which aspect of the patents defended before 1830? What do the author and the scholars disagree about regarding the patents that were defended before 1830? So I would say pay attention to that and answer the question. I'll count 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. All right, let's see. 11% of you believe A is the correct answer. None of you have gone for B or C. 44% each are equally divided over D and E. Guys, one question to all of you. Where does the passage talk about the rate, okay, the rate of vindication? Where does the passage talk about rate of vindication being lower in later suits? Does the passage talk about patents were vindicated at a certain rate before and after? Please answer this question. Does the passage talk about the vindication rate before and after 1830? Is that what the author disagrees about? Next question is, does the author disagree? Okay, let me restate my question. The last sentence says that the proportion of patentees, proportion of verdicts in favor of patentees began to increase in 1830. All right. Does the author say that this proportion did not increase? Does the author say that this proportion did not increase? I'll repeat. Does the author disagree that the proportion of verdicts did not begin to increase? Does the author disagree with that? Does the author disagree? No. If the author doesn't disagree, then how can E be the answer, guys? The question is asking you, okay, the point of disagreement between the author and the scholars. So the point of disagreement is about the bias, about the anti-patent thing, about the attitude. It is not about the proportion of verdicts. And therefore, the answer is not E but D. Okay? So none of you have, 11% of you have marked A. All right? Whether the patents were granted for this part, usefulness of inventions, it has not been mentioned anywhere. Relevant to the US state economy, this is only something that the scholars say, right? Only scholars talk. The author does not say anything about it. Patents were particularly likely to be annulled by judges. Again, the author does not disagree about it. But whether the patents were invalidated for arbitrary reason, the author says no. The scholar says yes. All right. Scholars believe that patents were invalidated for arbitrary reason, right? Here it's given here. Here. So this is the part that scholars say, right? Judges were anti-patent. And then the author says, if judges were prejudiced. So the author clearly does not believe that judges were prejudiced. All right. And therefore, B is the correct answer. Whether patents were indicated at lower rate or not, there is no disagreement about that. And actually, the rate of vindication is not mentioned. Only we know that the proportion of verdicts began to increase, and the author does not disagree with that fact. Do let me know, guys, if this is clear to all of you. Anupam, I hope this is clear now. So, guys, do let me know if all is clear. And once again, let me point out to you that building involved in the ability to read in an involved and evolved manner needs time. You need to develop the right reading and comprehension skills, small things, to pause and read, to note the words which you don't know the meaning of, and to be able to understand the meaning of those words, to be able to differentiate between facts and opinions, and then also to be able to differentiate between whose opinions are we talking about. And finally, to be able to summarize. All of this matters, and this takes time. So give yourself the time that you need, guys. Let me share with you once again. Let me share with you the link to the free trial version of the course in case you want to take a peek at the course if you're not already a student. And once again, if you are new to GMAT, if you are new to the prep, or even if you are old and you are at a plateau, your score is not moving, you can book a free call with our experts and discuss your problem with them. Any other queries, if you have related to your prep, current prep, you can ask me, guys. So do let me know if you have any other queries, guys. I hope you found the webinar to be beneficial, helpful. Even though some of you might be already be GMATWhiz students, I hope this was still helpful for you in understanding how to read better, especially when it comes to the author's opinion related questions. Do let me know if you have any queries, guys. Otherwise, let me bid you all a very good night and all the best for your exams. GMAT passages seems to be from 17th century. Well, they do include a lot of passages based on women's history, on the American history, on the African American history. So that is there. Yeah, it is not a normal English. I don't know what is a normal English passage, but yes. So if you want to make yourself comfortable around such passages, there is this website that I can suggest to you. This is Oxford, I think. Let me just remember it. Oxford re.com, I think. Yeah, re.com. Yep. That's the, I think that's, you can read up the articles on American history on that website. Okay. So, Ishwar, good question. Yes, GMATWhiz questions are a little more difficult to eliminate. And you would see that the language used by GMATWhiz questions, answer choices, they are a little more close. In fact, this question that you did just now, you see the language that judicial attitude, they return to the previous verdict and they return to the judicial standard, almost similar language. And that is where you have to differentiate. So that's okay, Ishwar. If you're doing well on the OG questions, don't worry. On the GMATWhiz platform, if you're able to get even a 65% accuracy, 65 to 70% accuracy, even between that, it's good. So don't worry. So guys, thank you for your attention, your interaction. Thank you very much, and all the very best to all of you. Akash, do well, don't panic, keep your cool. All right, guys, take care, and a good night to all of you if you're ending your day, and a good day to you who have just begun your day. Take care, guys. Bye.